Well, good morning everyone and welcome to the show. Hope you guys had a great night. Did you have a great night, Fernando?
Yes.
It was almost like we were here 24 hours ago.
Pretty much.
What we have going on today is this guy here. This is a Toyota Highlander. And we're gonna put a stereo in it. He's already got a radio in the dash. This guy right here, it's a Pioneer 3800 VHS. And what he plans on doing is upgrading the front speakers. Apparently he's already upgraded these, but we are gonna be taking these door panels off and putting in some fast rings. We're gonna be putting fast rings and roadkill in the front doors. Along with that, we're also gonna put in some Expert Focal Flax. That's the PS 165 FXs in the front doors. And then we're gonna power the whole thing up with this guy right here, the XR 900.5. Now we're gonna put the 900.5 underneath the seat. Let's do a little planning and figure out how that's gonna go. Let's get inside the car. So every install requires a certain amount of planning, and this car is no different. We're gonna put the amp underneath the seat. Now we do that in a lot of cars, and we don't just shove the amp underneath the seat. We do a lot of thinking about it to make sure, for one, it's gonna function properly, there's proper ventilation, no one's gonna kick it. Let's hop into this car real quick and we're gonna show you what we have planned for this one. So what we got going on now is we just have this piece of plastic in here so we can test one, height, and also where this amplifier is gonna have to be in relationship to the seat as it moves back and forth, and also get an idea of how we're going to attach it into the car. In this case, we're going to make what we call a T-mount. There's going to be a brace that goes across here that holds a substrate. Then what we're planning on doing is adding in bolts like this right here. We're going to take a 1/2-inch piece of plastic. It's going to slide over these bolts and sit flush up against these knobs. That'll help to keep any debris out of the amplifier, but it's not going to go all the way across because right here there is a fan, so we want to make sure that the fan is exposed. Plus, we don't want people kicking this and screwing up our gains and stuff like that. So now that we've sat and we've talked about it, we've figured it out, we've slidden the seat back and forth at least a dozen times, we have an idea of what we want to do. So now Fernando is going to go ahead and start executing what we've decided to do. You excited?
I'm excited.
I knew you would be. All right, well, let's follow along as Fernando builds this cool amp rack and I do something else not as exciting on this car. Fernando's just informed me that he is done wiring up the amplifier. Let's go take a look at it, shall we? Amplifier looks good, Fernando.
Yes.
As we talked about, we're going to mount these brackets here to the back seat. We put this guy in. Go ahead and remove that so we can see. So that'll allow us to get to the adjustments, and then when we're done, that way no one can kick it. The fan will still circulate air through the amplifier. We have it all flex loomed up here so that it looks good up underneath the seat and it won't get all ripped up. And of course, the color-coded RCAs.
Yes.
Now he's gonna go ahead and get this into the car. Fernando is almost done with connecting the power wire under the hood. Let's take a look at what he's got going on here. So we have the fuse holder mounted to the battery retention bolt. We're just gonna make the quick jumper. We have our red heat shrink, so we know that this is a constant 12 volts. I just wanted to show you this so you guys don't go, what kind of subs did you guys put in? For a subwoofer, we went with just a Pioneer 110 downfront enclosure. For those of you guys aren't familiar with it, it just has the Pioneer IB flat driver in it. He wants something that he can move around. He wasn't even gonna do a subwoofer, and we're like, yeah, you gotta do something. This has the third row seating. Those seats will still come up. He can do whatever he wants with them. We're done. Let's give it a try. So the plan was to take the rear doors off and simply put fastenings on because that's what he wanted to do. Oh well. So this is what we got going on the rear door. He's got some cool speaker plugs, not so bad, but he's got them pinched here behind the speaker mount. We have a 5 1/4 and what looks like a 6 1/2 inch mount, so we got this 1/4 inch gap going around here. Fast rings are not going to help this. We need to take this mount off and put the proper mount in place so that we can then put the fast rings on. I mean, granted, it's a 5 1/4 where a 6 1/2 should go, but that's what he's got. But we at least can fix this, make it the right way. I mean, yes, this will work, I suppose, but the whole purpose of the fast ring is to capture that dynamic energy, move it forward. That's not going to work when you have all these giant gaps like this. It's utterly pointless. So these are some of the surprises you run into when, you know, you take in something like this, that it's like, oh no, the rear speakers are already in, no big deal. This might be acceptable for somebody else. It's definitely not acceptable for us, and especially if we're supposed to be adding something to it to make it sound better. You know, you can't build a house on a pile of sand. Ooh. Deep thought for the day. So we have the right brackets for the door. These are the BKT SB920s from Best Kits. And the nice thing about these is that, like, you can mount the speaker in there just right and it will cover up the gap. So I mean, it's a nice fit. However, I want something a little bit firmer. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and make a little 16th inch top for this and make the hole this size so that the speaker lines in perfect. So we have some 16th inch ABS. We're gonna go ahead and router out 2 circles. So we'll take this over to the saw, cut this up real quick, zip these out real fast. So we have our ring, we have our bracket that we're going to be using. What we just did is we glued them together so that we have a nice firm mount. We can break these pieces off, we're not going to need them. We'll go ahead and do that to this one as well. Give that one a minute to dry. This one should be good. Now we'll go ahead and add some foam to it. This foam is just going to be so that it's not plastic on metal. So we have our 2 adapters prepped now, ready to go. This is a much nicer fit than what he had before. We've gone ahead and insulated up the wiring that he's using. Now we'll go ahead and get this over to the door. What we want to take with us is a drill bit, because what we want to do is once we get this over there, we can line this up. We want to make sure we pre-drill these holes. We just don't want to drive into ABS. ABS really doesn't do that well when you do that. So now we have the speaker properly mounted in the door with a very firm mount. There's no gaps anymore. This is in really well. We've added the fast rings. We've added some foam to the actual mount so there'll be no rattling. So this guy's good. We'll go ahead and get this door panel back on and we'll head over and do that side. Alright, so we just got the mid-range out of the dash and we're going to go ahead and put a new tweeter here. But what we need to do is make 2 plates to mount that. But before we do that, let's go ahead and take a look at the speakers we're going to be putting in the front doors. It is the Flax Series Focal. And the reason they call it the flax has to do with this cone material that they're using. It has a cast aluminum basket. It's a fairly beefy looking speaker, nice size magnet. They come with a decent size crossover. So this particular crossover is bi-ampable, meaning you can run an amp in for the tweeter and an amp in for the mid-range if you want. So you can run a 4-channel amp directly into this crossover, or a 2-channel in the case of what we're doing in this car. Then of course it comes with 2 tweeters. Now inside the crossover it has these little guys right here. These are the little buses you'd remove if you wanted to connect it bi-ampable. Otherwise you want to leave them in place. And then what we'll do for our installation is this set here is the negative, this set's here is the positive. All we have to do is bring a terminal into one of each one of these and it'll function both outputs here. We also have a mid-range flat or high and a tweeter adjustment of 0 or -3. So now what we have to do is figure out how to get these tweeters to mount up in the dash with limited or no mounting. This set of speakers, these aren't our speakers. He didn't buy these speakers from us. These are actually his speakers that I believe he bought used. We're probably missing some of the mounts. I'm not real sure. Normally we'd make a flat panel, have a speaker cup drop this into. So we might have to dig through our parts bin and see if we can find something that this tweeter will sit into. Because the only other thing we have is this funky angle mount thing, which really isn't gonna do it for what we're trying to do. So we went ahead and dug through our bin of random tweeter parts and we found a set of Alpine mounts that with a little bit of work we'll be able to get these guys to fit up inside the dash and mount into the bracket that we're gonna make. They just have this little spring we need to get out of the way. We'll add some foam so it fits in there nice and tight, and of course we'll put our little foam on the front of them just like the factory, push up into the factory grill. We've already made this mount here, so let's go see if we can find that. Now, Toyota, for some reason, can't figure out how to make one universal speaker. Each one of these mounts is for a different Toyota. So what we want to do is just kind of lay these flat and figure out which one we have. Alright, so it's for the Tacoma. So now what we want to do is get some plastic, make us some speaker mounts. Now when making these templates, I like to pre-drill these holes before I router them. Alright, let's get this thing over to the router. Alright, so we have our two mounts made. We're going to go ahead and get these tweeters up in there. We're going to add a little bit of foam around so that it fits into this housing a little better. Makes it nice and snug. Alright, so we went ahead and finished this one. It's got foam on the top here, and the reason why we did that is because there's foam on the top here. So now this will go ahead and go in, couple with the dash, all of that tweeter sound will come up, and we'll be all good. The reason why we don't have to paint this is because the grill itself is only this big, so you won't see this through the dash. Now we'll go ahead and finish up this wiring, finish up this tweeter. Alright, so these guys are all set and ready to go. The last thing we want to do is a polarity test to see which is positive, which is negative. Focal, it's a hit or miss, so we're going to just go ahead and do it. So on this guy, the stripe is negative. Go ahead and put some heat shrink on the positive. Let's go ahead and test both. Don't assume that one is this and one, so always test. Alright, in this case they are the same, that's a bonus. Remember, these things are, these things have been touched by someone else, so a person or a machine. Don't just assume that positive, negative, don't assume because one is this that the other is going to be identical. If you've got the tool to test it, take the extra 2 minutes and test it. We're going to set these aside like we said. Let's go get the radio out of the car. The radio's out of the dash, and now we can figure out where we're gonna hide those two big crossovers. And there's tons of room in this dash, so that's great. And there's a bolt here, there's another bolt here. So what I'm thinking about doing is building a panel that goes across there, bends down into an L, and then allows me to stack both of these crossovers on top of one another in here in the dash. So that's the plan for right now. So let's go ahead and take some measurements and see if that'll actually work. And if so, build it. Alright, so we have the basic shape of how we want this. Let's go take it over to the table saw, cut this out. Alright, so we've got it all mocked up. The idea is this is stacked, it's bolted into place. Let's take it in the car, see how it looks there. So we went ahead and removed the 2 bolts so we could make sure that the holes we drilled lined up. They do, they line up perfect. This will sit in there nice and tight. Looks really nice back in the dash. It's almost hidden up in there. So now what we want to do is go ahead and start getting some of the wiring done on that. We're going to run new wires up to the tweeters, and then we're going to use the factory existing wire to run the mid-range. So the first thing we need to do, of course, is remove tape from the existing harness and get this guy all stripped back. And then once we do that, we'll start figuring out how far wires need to be lengthened and what needs to be done there. The harness is all set and ready to go back into the car. We've got our crossover all wired up, mounted back in. We went ahead and color coded our wiring so that we know what's what. The tweeters have a red slash, the inputs are just the solid colors. We have our tweeter wires run right here. They're in the flex loom. We added some color coding here so we'll know what's what in the dash when it's close. This harness is all set and ready to go. Our rears will attach here, and then our fronts will attach here. We're gonna go ahead, get this mounted in the dash. Let's head over to the car. So to fit these speakers in the door, we're gonna use the Metra 828147. It's this guy right here. Now what we need to do in order to get this speaker to fit is break off all these little tabs that are in here so that it's nice and big. That will allow this woofer to sit in there. It also spaces it out from the door just like the factory one. We're gonna use this, and we're gonna use some roadkill. So let's get this guy over to the car, along with a set of fast strings. So one of the nice things about saving those door speakers for last is, you know, if you guys have been following the show, Toyotas and their polarity have been really kind of sketchy. So because we don't have the door panels back on yet, we just have them all hooked up, we can go ahead and do a polarity test now and make sure that they are correct before we put the door panels back on. So we're almost ready to do some testing. At this point, we have all the stuff in. We can take a little listen to it. We're gonna set some gains, maybe run the auto EQ section, you know, the usual stuff. So let's finish that up. I act like it's only gonna take 5 minutes. It's not, it's gonna take like an hour. All right, let's hop to it. Are you good? All right, so a little bit of time has passed. We're in the car. We just got done setting some gains. Sorry, camera was off. What we're going to do now is we're gonna do the auto EQ, which is sitting right here. The nice thing about auto EQ is that if you set the gains too high, and this is just FYI, the auto EQ will substantially lower things down because it can detect things like clip and stuff like that. So if you get in there and it's like front and rear have negative numbers on them, you have your gain up too high. So go ahead and turn it back down and run auto EQ again. Oh, no, that's right on.
59.
Okay, so it is right on. Okay.
59.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing how perfect that is. Okay, I just wanted to check it to make sure. That's cool. All right, guys, that brings this one to a close. Now, you know, you guys always ask about like tuning and EQs and setting things up. And you know, like for this one, we ran the auto EQ, and yeah, I mean, it's nice because it gets us pretty close to where it needs to be. Not perfect, but close. It's hard to say, all right, EQ needs to be set here, this frequency needs to be set there. At the end of the day, it's not like that. You actually just have to sit in the car and listen to it. The problem is what most people want to do is just hit that magic button and it just does it for you, and that's not going to work because each person has a little bit of taste. Auto EQ, all that really works on is phase, polarity, clipping, distance, stuff like that. It doesn't actually work the EQ. It's one of those names that doesn't do what it says. Not adjusting the 13 band EQ, which is a lot of people think it does that. You still have to sit in there and play with that. And for that, we used, in this one, we were using the audio control eye test mic. If you've ever been to the eye doctor, setting an EQ is a lot like going to the eye doctor. Is this good? Is this bad? Is this good? Is this bad? Once you find something you like, leave that one alone, move on to the next one. All right, guys, I know that didn't help, but sorry. Okay, Fernando, you good?
Good.
As always, thanks for watching, guys. Really do appreciate it. We're glad you enjoy this series. It's all you, Fernando.
All right, on to the next one.
See ya.